The alarms kept going off. For 36 hours straight, they had been crying in every hallway, room and corner of Nexus Station. The noise was enough to make anyone go insane, but that wasn't the worst thing going on right now. Nexus Station was very big. Imagine a huge wheel made of metal and glowing lights that slowly spins around a neutron star in deep space. It was home to 50,000 people, or beings as they were called. People lived there. So did many other alien races from all over the galaxy. They all worked, ate and raised their families together. It was a nice place. A place that is safe. Up until now. Things had gone very wrong. The quantum resonance stabilizer was no longer working. If you're like most people, you probably don't know what that is. Picture reality as a piece of fabric, and Nexus Station is sitting on top of it. The stabilizer's job is to keep the fabric flat and smooth. The fabric starts to rip if you don't have it. Things go wrong when reality breaks open. Very bad things. The kind of things that make the station and everyone on it disappear into a dimensional rift. 28 aliens stood around the broken stabilizer in the main engineering bay, which was a huge room full of blinking machines and holographic screens. These weren't just any aliens. You could find the smartest beings in 12-star systems. The Krell were big, smart bugs with hard shells on their bodies. Because their brains were divided into 12 parts, they could think about 12 complicated problems at once. People could barely handle one. Then there were the Luxons, who weren't even real. They were made of pure energy and floated around like living light shows. They could see in 11 different ways. The Luxons' knowledge of the universe made them seem almost godlike because humans can only see in 3 dimensions. And the Voth? These beautiful crystal creatures that looked like diamonds walking around. They didn't talk to each other. They talked in math. Just numbers and math. It would take a person years to understand all of the math that went into their way of thinking. These smart people had been working on the problem for 36 hours. They did tests. They fought with each other using clicks, pulses, and math. They made computer models and ran tests on them. They did everything they could think of. But they all came to the same conclusion. There was no way to fix the stabilizer. Not with what they had on the station. The parts they needed were on a cargo ship from the nearest manufacturing planet and would take 3 weeks to get there. They had 8 hours before the station fell apart. Commander Velis was standing close to the entrance to the engineering bay. He was a Krell, tall and scary, with a dark carapace that had lost its shine because he was stressed and didn't get enough sleep. His antennae were drooping low, which meant he was tired and worried for his kind. He looked out at the group of people who were outside, pressing against the windows to see what was going on. Velis turned on the station's communication system. His voice, which was instantly translated into dozens of languages, could be heard on every speaker on Nexus Station. Attention all residents. We're starting to evacuate people who don't need to be there. In 6 hours, shuttles will start to leave. Please go to your assigned assembly points in an orderly manner. Stay calm. We're in charge of the situation. But they weren't in charge of the situation. Everyone was aware of it. You could tell by the way people walked through the halls that they were in a hurry. You could hear the fear in the way parents called for their kids, their voices tight with barely hidden fear. The station was their home, their safe place in the dark of space. And now it was failing. A family stood together in the crowd that was pushing against the engineering bay windows. There was a man, a woman, and 2 children. They looked like normal people. The man was in his early 40s and had brown hair that was starting to thin on top. He had on a plain work coverall with a patch on the shoulder that said, Colonial Maintenance Services. His wife stood next to him, holding their youngest child, a boy who was somehow sleeping through all the noise and chaos. Their daughter, who was probably 10 years old, was wide-eyed and paying attention to everything. Tom was the name of the man. Just Tom. He worked on colony worlds, fixing things like air recyclers, water purifiers, and waste systems. Nothing fancy. Not anything that would make the news. He was the kind of guy who went to work, did his job, and then went home to his family. Tom and his family were supposed to be on their way to a new job posting right now. They had paid for a ride on a transport ship that was going to stop at Nexus Station to get more fuel. That was supposed to be a 6-hour break. Instead, they had been stuck here for 2 days while engineers worked to fix whatever had broken. Tom watched the alien engineers fix the stabilizer through the window. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could tell how they were feeling by the way they moved. The Krell's shoulders were slumped. The Luxon's light is getting dimmer. The Voth had stopped moving completely, which probably meant they were doing math in their heads. They were quitting. His daughter pulled on his sleeve. She was named Beth, and she was curious like her father and stubborn like her mother. Dad, she said softly, will we be all right? Tom looked down at her. He had always tried to be honest with his children. Not brutally honest, but honest enough that they would believe him when it mattered. Not sure, kiddo. The engineers in there are doing their best. But they're not fixing it. No. No, they aren't. Beth was quiet for a second while she thought. Then she said something that would change everything. You fix things all the time. Can't you help them? Linda, his wife, gave him a sharp look. The look that married people get after being together for a long time. It was very clear, don't even think about it. Tom almost paid attention to her. Almost. These were the best engineers in the galaxy. He was just a guy who worked on colony worlds fixing toilets and air filters. What could he do that they couldn't? But then he looked through the window at the stabilizer. Looked at it closely. And there was something about it that seemed familiar. Not the quantum physics or the dimensional math or any of that high-tech stuff. But the way it was put together. The houses around it. The mounting brackets that keep everything in place. It made him think of something. Tom was moving toward the engineering bay door before he could talk himself out of it. Linda yelled after him, but he was already inside, walking on the clean floor in his dirty work boots and leaving marks on the polished surface. 28 heads of aliens turned to look at him. The machines hummed and alarms went off in the distance, but the room was quiet. Tom stopped a few feet from the stabilizer and cleared his throat. Hey there. Tom is my name. I do work around the house. I was wondering if I could help you with your problem. For a long time no one said anything. Then Commander Velas stepped forward, and his mandibles clicked softly. Person. This is very advanced technology. Even the best engineers from many star systems have not been able to fix it. Thanks for being willing to help, but I'm not sure what you could do to help unless you have advanced degrees in quantum mechanics and dimensional physics. Tom nodded slowly. Yeah, I thought you'd say that. And you are correct. I don't know anything about quantum stuff or dimensional stuff. But here's the deal, we all have 8 hours to live. And from where I am, it looks like you don't have a solution. So what's the problem with letting me look? In the best case, I might see something you missed. If things go wrong, I waste 5 minutes of your time and we're back where we started. The aliens stared at each other. There seemed to be some kind of silent communication between them. Finally, a Luxon named Cal moved forward, his energy form pulsing softly. Let him try. At this point we have nothing to lose. Velas's antennae moved, which could have been a sign of annoyance or acceptance. Okay. But please don't touch anything that is sensitive. This gear is... Tom was already walking toward the stabilizer, not paying attention to the warning. He bent down low and got on his hands and knees to see where the device connected to the station's power grid and structural supports. The aliens looked at him with a mix of interest and barely hidden disdain. This person, a simple maintenance worker, thought he could fix something in minutes that they couldn't fix in a day and a half. Tom took a small flashlight out of his pocket and shone it on the mounting brackets. He didn't say anything for almost a minute, he just looked. Then he made a noise that could have been surprise or recognition. He said, "Ha." "What?" Velas said, getting closer. "Do you have a bigger light?" "This little one isn't smart enough." Avath gave him what looked like a crystal wand. When Tom touched it, a bright white light filled the space under the stabilizer. He moved around so that his head was almost completely under the device. Then he laughed. Laughed out loud. "What is funny?" Cal asked, his face lighting up with confusion. Tom wiggled out and stood up, brushing off the dust on his coverall. "Your quantum stabilizer is working fine." "Nothing at all." "What do you mean it's okay?" Velas said it slowly. "The part of the stabilizer that does all the quantum stuff is working perfectly, I mean the actual stabilizer part. The stabilizer isn't the problem." He pointed to the houses around it. "The box you put it in is the problem." Tom was in the middle of the engineering bay, looking at the tools that were all over the workbenches around him. There were dozens, maybe even hundreds, of them, all shiny and fancy and completely useless to him. Aliens made everything here. There were these weird gripping tools made for the Krell's mandibles, which were like insect jaws but much more precise. The Luxons had these energy-shaping things that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. The Voth also had these crystal interface tools that you could use with your mind through some kind of mathematical telepathy that Tom couldn't even begin to understand. But a wrench? A screwdriver? A hammer? Nothing. There isn't a single tool made for regular human hands. Tom picked up one of the Krell tools and turned it over in his hands to see how it worked. It was smooth and cold, and it looked like a crescent moon with small teeth on the inside curve that helped it grip. He squeezed it to see what would happen. Nothing took place. He said to himself, "This is going to be interesting." Commander Velas got closer and his antennae twitched nervously. The Krell had been on edge for 36 hours straight and you could tell. He moved in a jerky, unsure way. He asked, "What do you need?" "We can give you any tools we have in stock. Energy calibrators, precision instruments, and molecular realignment devices." Tom cut in, "A wrench would be nice. Just a simple wrench. You know, the kind that you use to turn bolts? If you have one, a socket set might work. A pry bar would also be useful." Velas's antennae drooped in confusion. "I don't get it. Those are very basic mechanical tools. You must need something more advanced for work this delicate." Tom said, "I need something I can hold in my hand and use." He grabbed another alien tool, this one looking like a bunch of fiber optic cables that had been twisted together. "What is this even for?" "Quantum-level precision assembly," a Voth engineer said, and its crystalline body made a soft sound as it moved. "It can change individual atoms with perfect accuracy." Tom nodded slowly. "So, it's basically really fancy pliers with a needle nose." "Understood." He put the tool down carefully, sure that it cost more than his whole year's pay. "I appreciate all this high-tech stuff, but I can't use any of it. Just leave me alone for a while so I can think of something." Tom thought the problem itself was pretty easy. The heat had made the housing around the stabilizer bigger. When metal gets hot, it gets a little bigger. Most of the time it's not a problem, but when you're working with something as delicate as a quantum resonance stabilizer, even a little bit of pressure in the wrong place can mess things up. So it was easy to fix. He had to move the housing so that it wasn't putting pressure on the stabilizer at a bad angle. He had to shim the mounting points, which meant putting thin pieces of wood under them to make up for the extra space. He also needed to add some kind of heat management so that this wouldn't happen again when the station got hot. Easy. In theory. In real life. He was using things he'd never used before. Metals that weren't found on Earth. Alloys that probably needed a lot of chemistry knowledge just to say. He had to do all of this with tools made for animals with mandibles, the ability to control energy, and the ability to read minds. Oh, and he had 5 hours and 18 minutes before the station blew up and killed everyone on board. No stress. Tom looked around the engineering bay and tried to think. He looked over at the observation window where his family was watching. His daughter Beth had her face right up against the glass, and her breath made it foggy. Linda, his wife, was next to her holding their son Mikey, who was still asleep for some reason. That kid could sleep through anything. If a bomb went off, Mikey would just roll over and keep snoring. Beth saw him looking and waved with excitement. Tom waved back, and that small thing helped him focus. He needed to work this out. Not just for the 50,000 people who work at this station, but also for his family who were right there watching him. Okay. The first problem was that the bolts that held the housing in place were stuck tight because of the heat. He needed to take them off so he could realign everything, but they wouldn't move. He needed a lot of torque, and he had to use it in a very small space where most tools wouldn't fit. Tom walked over to the cart just outside the engineering bay where his family's bags were stacked. Linda looked at him with a puzzled look on her face as he began to go through their bags. She yelled through the door, "Tom, what are you doing?" "Getting something." "Hey Beth, did you take off that hair tie you were wearing earlier?" Beth's hand went to her hair. "This one?" "Dad, it's been in my hair all day." "It's kind of gross." "Perfect. That means it can stretch and bend." "Give it to me." Beth took out the hair tie, let her brown hair fall loose around her shoulders, and handed it to him through the door. It was purple with tiny stars on it, and yes, it was definitely worn in and stretchy because it was used every day. Tom also took a metal bracket off the door to a maintenance closet down the hall. No one would miss it. Most likely. There was also a fancy crystal stylus thing that one of the Voth engineers had put down on a workbench. It was about a foot long, perfectly balanced, and the Voth made a panic chime sound when Tom picked it up, which made it sound like it cost 10,000 credits. The Voth engineer asked, "What are you doing with that?" "That's a tool for precise computing. It is set to be accurate to within 0.0001%. Tom said simply, "I'm using it as a lever." He took Beth's hair tie, wrapped it around the door bracket, and then pushed the crystal stylus through the loop. He made a temporary tension wrench with a lot of torque by pulling on one end and pushing on the other. The alien engineers watched in a mix of horror and interest as Tom got down on the floor, put his makeshift tool against the first seized bolt and pulled hard. There was no change. He changed how he was holding on, put his feet in a better position and pulled again. His arm muscles were sore. His forehead started to sweat. The Voth was making sad chiming sounds because its expensive stylus was being used as a common tool. Then, with a loud metallic scream that made everyone in the bay wince, the bolt came loose. It turned a 1/4 of an inch, then a 1/2 inch, and then it started to spin freely. Tom sat back, breathed heavily and smiled. He said, "Good news. It works." He looked at the Voth and said, Bad news for you. You're going to need a new stylus. This one is definitely bent now. Velus's mandibles were wide open in shock. That really worked. You used a simple rubber band and a very expensive tool that costs more than a small spacecraft, and it worked. Torque is torque, Tom said as he moved on to the next bolt. It doesn't matter if you use fancy quantum math or just simple leverage to figure it out. It doesn't matter how you do it. Physics works the same way. He worked carefully, one bolt at a time. Every single one of them fought him. Each one had to move his strange, makeshift tool to the right angle and apply pressure until something broke. It took a long time and made me sweat. Not very nice. Not very smart. Just pure mechanical force was used until the stubborn metal had no choice but to work with it. The alien engineers stood back and looked. A few of them were writing things down. Others were probably scanning to see how this simple method was working when their more advanced ones had not. Tom put down his tools and carefully lifted the housing when the last bolt came free with a satisfying ping. He thought it would be lighter, but it was probably 60 pounds of rare metal alloys. He carefully put it down and looked at the stabilizer that was showing underneath. Now it was time for the hard part. He needed shims, which are thin pieces of wood that help fix the angle of the mounting. All of the materials that were available were wrong. They were either too thick or too thin, and they didn't have time to set up the tools they needed to cut them to the right size. Tom stood there for a while, lost in thought. Then he took the hydration pack off his belt. It was one of those polymer bladder things that held water and could work in different levels of gravity. He had been drinking from it all day while they were waiting. He emptied the last of the water and took out his pocket knife. "What are you up to now?" Cal the Luxon asked, and his energy form pulsed with interest. "Making shims." Tom carefully opened the hydration pack and laid it flat. The material was strong but bendable, and it was made to hold liquid under pressure. He cut it into strips and then folded those strips to the right thicknesses, using his eyes and hands to measure. A Krell engineer came closer to see. That material won't be able to handle the changes in the magnetic field. The molecular structure will start to break down within minutes of being exposed to. Tom put the first improvised shim in place under a mounting point. The housing moved about half a degree. He looked at the alignment, nodded to himself, and put another shim on the other side. The displays on the monitors flickered. The numbers began to change. The Krell engineer stopped talking in the middle of a sentence and looked at the readouts. "That's not possible. The material can't handle the magnetic fields. It's time for it to break down." "How?" Tom said as he looked over his work. "Well, I guess it can." Tom's hands stayed still on the activation panel. 3 seconds went by. Then 4. Then 5. There was nothing going on. He could feel his heart pounding in his throat. Every beat seemed to echo in his ears, louder than the alarms that had finally stopped ringing, louder than the hum of the station systems, and louder than anything else in the universe right now. There was no sound at all in the engineering bay. 28 alien engineers stood perfectly still, hardly moving. Or not breathing at all, like the Luxons who didn't need to breathe at all. It was as if the whole station was holding its breath. Even the normal background noise of the equipment seemed to have stopped. Tom's eyes went to the countdown clock on the wall. You can't miss the big red numbers. 3 hours, 40 minutes, and 17 seconds until everything goes wrong. 3 hours, 40 minutes, and 16 seconds. 15 seconds. The numbers kept going down, and each one felt like a hammer blow. What if this didn't work? What if he had just wasted a lot of time with his improvised fixes, hair ties, and cut-up water bottles? What if the smartest beings in the galaxy were right and he was wrong? Now everyone was going to die because a maintenance worker thought he knew better? Beth, Tom's daughter, was still pressed up against the observation window. He could see her big eyes and how tightly she was holding onto the windowsill, which made her knuckles turn white. Linda, his wife, had one hand on Beth's shoulder and the other on their sleeping son. She looked at Tom through the glass, but he couldn't tell what she was thinking. Worry? Do you trust? Both? Then things took a turn. It began as a vibration. Tom first felt it in his teeth, like when you're close to heavy machinery or a big speaker. It was just a faint buzzing that made his molars tingle. Then it got stronger and spread through his whole body, moving down through his jaw and into his chest. The quantum resonance stabilizer was making a noise. It wasn't a sound that machines usually make. It was more than that, it was deeper and richer. It felt like it was alive, like the purr of a huge cat that was the size of a building and made of pure energy. It sounded like it came from all over at once. From the ground under Tom's feet. From the air around him. From inside his own bones. The sphere in the middle of the housing began to shine. At first it was just a soft blue light like the sky in the morning. It pulsed softly, and with each pulse it got a little brighter. The rhythm matched the humming and Tom could feel his own heartbeat matching it. Thump-hum, thump-hum, thump-hum. Then the holographic displays came to life. The engineering bay was filled with golden light so bright that Tom had to squint. Data streams appeared in the air, flowing like waterfalls of numbers and letters. They scrolled by too quickly for Tom to keep up with and too quickly for anyone to read. But the engineers from space could read them. Their eyes, sensors, or whatever they used to see followed the data flow with great intensity. One of the Voth engineers said, "Field strength rising." Its crystal body was ringing quickly now, like an alarm clock but more like music. It spoke in a tight, controlled voice, but Tom could hear the stress underneath. 40% quantum coherence. Tom didn't know what quantum coherence was. He just knew that 40% was better than 0%. 50%, the Voth said again. The ringing got faster. 60%. Tom looked down at the housing he had fixed. The stress fractures he had seen, which had started this whole thing, were changing right in front of him. They weren't going away completely. That would not be possible. You can't just get rid of damage to metal. But they were fading and becoming less clear. The stabilizer's magnetic fields were now spreading out evenly instead of gathering in one place. The pressure was spread out the way it was supposed to be. His quick fix was actually working. Cal the Luxon moved closer to the stabilizer, and his energy form glowed brighter than Tom had ever seen it. Dimensional stability improving, he said, and for the first time since Tom met him, the Luxon's voice showed emotion. It could have been hope. Maybe it was just relief. The rifts are closing. They're really closing. Tom understood what that meant. Reality itself had been ripping apart in space, where people couldn't see it. Like tears in fabric, but the fabric was the universe and the tears led to places where the laws of physics didn't work right. Where matter could be and not be at the same time. Where up and down, forward and backward, and all the other directions lost their meaning. Those tears were drying up now. Getting better. The quantum resonance stabilizer was doing its job again, making reality smoother and keeping the universe stable around Nexus Station. The hum got deeper and more echoey. Tom could feel it in his chest now and it made his ribs vibrate. The blue light from the sphere got stronger and stronger until it was almost too bright to look at directly. Inside the light, patterns swirled around, making it look like the aurora borealis was compressed into a basketball-sized ball. 70%, the Voth said. 80%. Commander Velis got closer, and his antennae shook so quickly that they were almost invisible. He was controlling several holographic displays at once, and Tom knew that Krell dealt with stress by clicking his mandibles quickly. Thermal distribution is holding, Velis said, his voice shaking a little. The heat dissipation is really working. The improvised fix is keeping the temperature in the right range. Tom almost laughed. The solution that was made up. He had put chewing gum on a quantum stabilizer. Not just any gum but the cheap spearmint kind that his daughter liked. You could get it at any corner store for about 50 cents a pack. And it was conducting heat, spreading it out, and keeping the housing from getting too hot again. There were probably engineers in the universe who had spent their whole lives studying thermodynamics and heat transfer. They had degrees, awards, and published papers on the subject. And a piece of gum was making them look bad. 90% coherence, the Voth yelled. Its ringing had reached a fever pitch. 95. The clock on the wall that counted down flickered. The number stopped going down. 3 hours, 39 minutes, and 47 seconds. It just froze there, no longer counting down to disaster. Tom took a deep breath. Everyone did. At this point, the whole engineering bay was on the edge of success and failure. The hum from the stabilizer got so loud and deep that it shook loose tools on nearby workbenches. The blue light pulsed one more time, and it was so bright that Tom had to look away. It was so bright that it made sharp shadows all over the bay. Then, like a wave crashing on the shore, something happened. Tom felt it go through him, this feeling that everything was coming together. Like when you're putting together furniture and that last screw finally goes in the right way, and all of a sudden the whole thing is strong and stable. The stabilizer was fully locked into place. All of the holographic screens in the engineering bay turned green. Just plain, solid, lovely green. The color of winning. The color of living. The emergency alarms that had been going off non-stop for 36 hours all over Nexus Station stopped. It was almost shocking how quiet it got all of a sudden. Tom's brain had started to ignore the constant crying because he was so used to it. The silence felt thick and heavy now that it was gone. Full operational capacity achieved, Velis said in a low voice. He spoke so softly Tom could barely hear him. Dimensional rifts are closed. The quantum field is stable. We're okay. We're really safe. No one moved. No one said anything. It was as if everyone in the bay had become a statue. Tom coughed. In the quiet, the sound seemed too loud. So, it worked? Cal said, it worked. His energy form was pulsing steadily now in a calm and steady way. Cool. Tom looked at his hands. They were shaking a little bit. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, making him feel tired, shaky, and a little out of touch with his own body. Is it okay if I go now? I can't tell if my wife wants to kiss me or kill me, and right now I don't know which one I'd rather have. That broke the magic. There was a lot of noise in the engineering bay. Aliens who had been standing still and looking professional suddenly started to move around a lot. The Voth engineer was already using tools that probably cost more than Tom's house on Earth to run new scans on the GUM. Tom thought that saving the station would be the end of everything. He could fix the problem, get back on the transport ship, go to his new job, and maybe tell the story at dinner parties for the rest of his life. A good tale. A wild story. The time he used a hair tie and some gum to save 50,000 people. He was totally wrong about that. That night, while Tom and his family slept, which was the first time in what felt like forever, something was going on in the galaxy. Someone in that engineering bay had been making a video. Tom never found out who it was. It could have been one of the engineers. It could have been footage from the station's security cameras. Anyone could have done it. They took that video and put it on Galactic Net, no matter who it was. That's like the internet, but for the whole galaxy. Billions of beings from thousands of worlds are all connected and share videos, information, political arguments, and pictures of their pets. The title of the video was, Human Maintenance Worker Fixes Critical Station Failure with Hair Accessories and Snacks. The next morning, Tom felt better than he had in days. Sleeping in a real bed made a big difference. His son Mikey was already up and playing with toy spaceships on the floor. Linda, his wife, was using the quarter's basic food processor to make coffee. A regular morning. Then his daughter Beth ran in from the other room, waving her data pad around like it was on fire. Hey Dad. You're well known. Tom was still tired and his brain was moving slowly. What? Hey. Beth pushed the datapad into his face. There's a video of you fixing the station. It's all over the place. And there are memes. Someone turned you into a cartoon, Dad? Tom took the datapad and squinted at the screen. He was there just as I thought. The video showed it all. He walked into the engineering bay with his dirty work boots on. He was lying on the floor with a flashlight looking at the house. He used Beth's hair tie and that expensive crystal stylus as a wrench. Him cutting his water bottle into pieces to make shims. And yes, there he was, carefully putting chewing gum on a piece of equipment worth billions of dollars while alien engineers looked on in horror. Tom's eyes got big when he saw the number of views at the bottom of the screen. 17 million people have seen it. 17 million. In less than 12 hours. Tom said, "Oh no." Beth corrected him saying, "Oh yes," and bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Keep going. Check out the memes." Tom went down the page. There were thousands of comments in dozens of languages, all of which were automatically translated. But it was the pictures that people had made that really got to him. Someone had drawn him as a superhero, with a cape flowing behind him and a tool belt around his waist that shot out hair ties and gum like weapons. The caption said, "Dad man, saving the galaxy one improvised fix at a time." In another picture he was surrounded by complicated math problems that were literally blowing up, and he was just calmly sticking gum on things with a blank look on his face. But Tom liked the simplest one the best. 28 alien engineers were shown with their hands, or whatever they had instead of hands, covering their faces in despair. There was also a stick figure drawing of a person in the middle who was just shrugging. The caption says, "Sometimes the answer is really simple." Tom said, "This isn't happening. It's happening." Beth was so excited that she was almost shaking. "My friends on Earth are texting me. People are curious if you really used my hair tie." "Did you really?" "They have to know." "Yes, I did use your hair tie. I'll get you some new ones." "I want 20 new ones." "No, 30. And I'm telling everyone at school." "Hey, my dad saved a space station." Linda brought coffee and stood behind Tom to look at the datapad. She was smiling, but there was more to her face than that. The type of worried fun. "Tom, you need to keep reading. It gets bigger." Tom looked through more of the feed. Beth was correct. The video wasn't just well-liked. It was spreading quickly through the galaxy. The view count had reached 43 million by the time the family went to the station's food court for lunch. 42 different star systems were talking about the video. 42. Tom couldn't even list 42 star systems. People kept seeing him. While they were eating, a Krell family came up and asked for a picture. Then a bunch of Luxon students asked for autographs. A Voth engineer actually bowed to him, which seems to be a big deal in their culture. Tom grumbled, "This is so strange," as he signed yet another datapad for yet another stranger. The video had changed completely by dinner time. A cultural event. News networks all over the galaxy were covering it. While waiting for their food, Tom saw one on a public screen. The news anchor, who looked like a jellyfish from a water world, was speaking in a way that made it sound like it was being translated automatically. The event at Nexus Station has started a conversation across the galaxy about what it means to be an expert, how to solve problems, and how practical experience is more valuable than theoretical knowledge. Cut to an interview with a well-known university professor who was a Krell with gray markings that showed he was very old. This person showed us something we've forgotten as we've tried to come up with more and more complicated solutions. Sometimes the answer is easy. The solution is sometimes very simple. We've gotten so caught up in the details that we've forgotten the basics. Another clip showed engineering students at an academy all gathered around the video, watching it frame by frame. One student said, "He just looked at it differently." Everyone else saw a quantum resonance stabilizer, but he saw a machine with bent brackets. He broke it down into its most basic parts. Tom stared at the screen, feeling more and more uneasy. They're looking at it like it's a philosophical statement. "I just fixed something." Linda said, "You fixed something that the smartest engineers in the galaxy couldn't. That means something to people." Tom's phone started to buzz. He had been ignoring it all day, even though it had been buzzing. He couldn't help but check the messages out of curiosity. A lot of them. Hundreds, really. He got messages from old friends and co-workers from a dozen different colonies, all congratulating him. Messages from news organizations asking for interviews. Messages from the Galactic Engineering Consortium offering him jobs as a teacher, consultant, or honorary degree. There was even a message from his mother, who lived on Earth and usually took weeks to respond to anything. "Are you eating enough in space, Thomas? I saw you on TV. You look skinny. Make sure you're eating enough vegetables. Also, I'm very proud of you. Love, Mom." That one made Tom smile no matter what. Beth was having a great time. She had been video calling her friends back on Earth, showing them around the station and telling the story with more and more dramatic details. And then Dad said, "Give me that really expensive crystal thing." The alien said, "No, that costs 10,000 credits." Dad said, "I don't care, we're all going to die anyway," and he just used it as a crowbar. Tom tried to say, "That's not quite how it happened." "Stop talking, Dad. I'm telling the story." Tom watched the effects of what he had done spread farther and farther over the next few days while the family waited for their ride to be ready to continue their trip. The Galactic Engineering Consortium said that they were going to change their courses. They were adding new classes on how to solve real problems, do maintenance work, and what they called adaptive engineering with limited resources. Students wouldn't just learn about tools and how to fix things, they would have to use them. Several star systems universities began to offer classes in a field they called human adaptive methodology. Tom looked up the description of one of the courses. Basically, it was a class on how to think like a maintenance worker. On looking for easy answers before hard ones. About using any tools that were available instead of waiting for the right conditions. Beth showed him a paper by a Krell engineer on her datapad. The title was silly, "The Overlooked Elegance of Good Enough, a Paradigm Shift in Engineering Philosophy." It was 60 pages long and mentioned Tom's repair 17 times. Beth laughed and said, "They wrote a whole research paper about you putting gum on things." Linda read over Beth's shoulder and said, "That's not what the paper is about. It's about how trying to be perfect can make things less useful. How waiting for the perfect answer can be worse than using a good answer right away. So it's a paper about me putting gum on things." Linda smiled. "Yes, dear. That's what it is. Someone even made a line of products." Tom saw the ad on a screen in the station market that was open to the public. Tools for Dad, useful answers to real problems. It was a toolkit made for people with simple mechanical tools that was sold on 40 different systems. The ad showed a person fixing different pieces of equipment while aliens watched in shock. "They're making money off this," Tom said, feeling a little hurt. Linda said, "You could sue." "For what?" "They're just selling tools. I guess it's okay if it helps people fix things." It had been 6 months since Tom fixed the quantum resonance stabilizer. It had been 6 months since his face had been on news feeds all over the galaxy. It has been 6 months since things changed. There was something important going on at Proxima Station, which was halfway across known space from where Tom lived now. The main school of the Galactic Engineering Consortium had been there for 300 years. This place was famous. You came here if you wanted to be an engineer, design starships, build space stations, or work with technology that pushed the limits of physics itself. The academy was huge, with shiny metal and floating platforms connected by force bridges. Some of the smartest people in 12-star sectors had come through its halls. People who graduated from here could do math in their heads to 17 decimal places. While other beings were still trying to figure out how to move things, they made engines that could go faster than light. They could argue about the details of quantum theory for days without sleeping, eating, or stopping to catch their breath. These were the best of the best. The smart people who made the galaxy's technology. But in 300 years, none of them had ever used chewing gum to fix anything. That was going to change. Professor Velis stood at the front of Lecture Hall 7, which is one of the Academy's biggest classrooms. The old Krell was different after the Nexus Station event. He was still smart and respected, but something about him had changed. A sense of humility that wasn't there before. His shell had gotten shiny again, but his antennae stayed lower than before, as if he were thinking more. The lecture hall was full of 200 students. They were from 40 different species and came from all over the known universe. Young Krell with shiny new shells. Luxon energy forms that flickered with the energy of youth and ambition. Crystalline Voth who still didn't know how to be patient like their elders. There were only a few people, which was strange for this school. And a lot of other kinds of animals are here to learn. A holographic display lit up the wall behind Velis. It showed a basic set of tools. Not a case for high-tech equipment. Not a very advanced set of tools. It's just a simple metal toolbox with scratches, dents, and oil stains. This is the kind of thing that would be in any maintenance worker's garage. Tom had owned this toolbox before. Linda, his wife, gave it to him after he said he didn't need it anymore. He had gotten that fancy new toolkit from the Galactic Engineering Consortium. It had been changed so that humans could use it. Linda said yes when the Academy asked if they could have his old toolbox for their new program. It was just sitting there collecting dust. It was now on display behind glass like something from a museum. A sign in several languages next to it said, "When theory fails, try practice. When something is too complicated, try making it simple. Call a human dad when nothing else works." Velis let the kids look at it for a while. A few of them were confused. Some people thought it was funny. Some people looked offended, as if showing a simple toolbox in this prestigious school was somehow disrespectful. "Welcome," Velis said, and his mandibles clicked, which the students would learn was a sign of nervousness. "This is the first class in practical engineering. The most recent addition to our curriculum." There was a ripple in the crowd. This class was well known to everyone. There was a lot of disagreement about it right away when it was announced 6 months ago. The senior faculty had been against it. There had been long arguments in academic circles. At this level, traditional engineering education was all about theory and getting things right. Before you did anything, you learned how to figure out every variable. You had to study for years before you could work with real tools. You reached theoretical perfection on paper before you ever tried to put it into practice in real life. All of that went out the window with this new class. It was all based on what one person who worked on maintenance at Nexus Station had done. What Tom did. What Tom did was the exact opposite of what this school had taught for 300 years. He had made it up. He had used all the tools he could find. He chose good enough, over theoretically perfect. He had tried things without being sure they would work. And for some reason it worked. Better than what 28 smart engineers who had followed the rules had come up with. Velis went on, "Today we will look at our first case study. The event at Nexus Station. You all have watched the video. I know you have. The last count showed that it had 300 million views. You've read the articles, the debates, and the analyses. But how many of you really know what happened there?" A Voth student raised a clear appendage and light bent around it. The person found thermal expansion stress that 28 trained engineers missed. "That's right," Velis said. "But that's the what. I'm asking why. Why did we miss it?" The room where the lecture was held got quiet. The students looked at each other, not sure what to do. Why did 28 of the best engineers in the galaxy, including me, fail to fix a problem that a maintenance worker did in less than 4 hours? A young Krell in the front row spoke up. "Because the problem was easier than you thought?" Partially true. But that's not the whole answer yet. Velis played with the holographic controls. The picture changed to show the Nexus Station engineering bay, frozen at the moment Tom walked in. "We failed because we were looking for problems that were too hard. We thought that a quantum resonance stabilizer, which is a very advanced piece of technology, would break down in equally advanced ways." He moved the display forward, showing video of the alien engineers running scans, making mathematical models, and arguing about quantum theory. "We did simulations of probabilities. There are 47,000 different ways that things could go wrong. We looked at quantum fluctuations in 11 different ways. We made models that could predict things by taking into account things that most beings can't even see. One more click. With just a flashlight, it now showed Tom lying on his back under the stabilizer. Then this person looked at the mounting bracket and said, "Ha, that's bent." The students laughed nervously. But the laughter wasn't mean. People were laughing because they were starting to understand something deep and a little embarrassing. This, Velas said, letting the word hang in the air, is what we now call the human effect. Some scholars like to call it the principle of practical simplicity. But most creatures in the galaxy call it something else. He stopped for a moment to make a point. It's called the dad fix. This time there was more laughing and less stress. The tendency for experts to choose complicated solutions over simple ones. The idea that complicated problems need complicated answers. The lack of vision that comes from knowing too much. Velas's antennae drooped a little. It almost cost 50,000 lives. Including mine. The laughter stopped. The students leaned in and listened. Velas moved the display forward again, showing Tom using Beth's hair tie and the crystal stylus as a wrench. Look at this. Pay close attention to it. This is a big change in the way engineers think about things. The video showed Tom having a hard time with the stuck bolt, his muscles straining and sweat on his forehead. There is nothing elegant about it. Nothing abstract. Just a lot of hard work until the problem went away. Velas said, "Traditional engineering education teaches you how to figure out the exact torque needed, choose the best tool, and apply force at the mathematically perfect angle. This person took what was there and pulled until it worked. No math. No practice runs. Just do it." One of the 5 students in the lecture hall raised her hand. "But professor, isn't that risky? What if his makeshift tool didn't work? What if he had used too much force and hurt the housing even more?" "That's a great question," Velas said. "And 6 months ago I would have completely agreed with you. But think about this, we had 8 hours before everything went wrong. The safe, planned way had already failed for 36 hours. When does being careful become more dangerous than doing something?" He let that sink in before moving on. The person looked at the situation. He decided that the chance of trying was lower than the chance of doing nothing. He did something. This is the main idea behind what we call adaptive practical engineering. The screen showed the next part. Tom is cutting up his hydration pack to make shims. Some students gasped or made sounds that were similar to their species' sounds of disbelief. "He's using a water bottle," a Luxon student said, their energy form pulsing with confusion. "That material isn't safe to be around a magnetic field." "Correct," Velas said. "It shouldn't have worked. According to all of our tests, that polymer should have broken down in a matter of minutes. But it didn't. Why?" "Be quiet. Specifications are just suggestions based on what happens in a controlled lab. In real life things are messier than in labs. In reality, good enough often works better than theoretically perfect, because perfect conditions don't happen in real life." Velas showed the last part, Tom carefully putting chewing gum on the places where the heat was too much, while alien engineers watched in horror. Velas said softly, "This moment changed everything. Not only for teaching engineering but also for how we think about solving problems in the whole galaxy. A maintenance worker taught us that sometimes the simplest answer is the best one. That you need to stop thinking about things and start doing them. Being able to be okay with good enough is as important as being able to do things perfectly." He turned off the screen and looked directly at his students. "This class is here because of what happened at Nexus Station. Yes, you will learn theory. But you'll also learn how to use your hands, limbs, energy fields, or whatever else your body gives you. You will learn how to make things up as you go along. To change. To try things without being sure they'll work." A senior Voth student spoke up. "But professor, this way of doing things isn't very strict. If we're just trying random solutions, how can we call ourselves engineers?" Velas said, "They're not random. Carefully watch the video again." The person had been fixing similar problems in different situations for many years. Pattern recognition, not random chance, helped him come up with his solutions. He thought that a quantum stabilizer was similar to simpler machines he had worked with before. That's not luck. That's a different kind of knowledge.